I think at this point we're all very aware of the extremely popular ETFs that guys like me frankly don't shut up about. But there's many reasons why these ETFs are talked about so much, and it's mainly because they are some of the greatest ETFs to buy and hold long term. Now I'm referring to the ETFs like VOO, VTI, and SCHD. So these ETFs tend to be arguably some of the top ETFs to buy and hold long term, and it's something that I think we can all agree on for the most part. But there are a handful of ETFs out there that, to me, are considered extremely underrated, and are just as good, if not better than some of those extremely popular S&P 500 or growth ETFs. So we're going to go over a few of those today, and 2 out of the 3 in this list have completely outperformed SCHG on the 10-year chart. And SCHG, as we know, is another very beloved high-growth long-term ETF, but we can talk about that a little bit later. So starting with the first one, it's one of my favorites. It's SPLG. And to me, this is a very underrated yet high-quality S&P 500 ETF issued by SPDR, or some people like to say SPDR. Now, the very first thing worth mentioning about this ETF is that it's extremely cheap to own. Its expense ratio is one of the lowest you can find out of any ETF. It's 0.02%, even lower than Vanguard's VOO at 0.03%, so not much lower, but still lower nonetheless. And the holdings in this portfolio, comparing it to other similar ETFs, are going to be virtually identical. I mean, it's quite literally the S&P 500 index. And even comparing its returns to Vanguard's VOO, again, they're basically the exact same. But what makes SPLG fairly underrated to me is the fact that it's much cheaper to own, and it's also been around for a lot longer, so a longer track record. So SPLG is definitely a great option for long-term S&P 500 exposure. This brings me to the next underrated yet high-quality growth ETF called IWY, or the iShares Russell 200 Growth ETF. Now this is the one that's very similar yet potentially slightly better than Schwab's SCHG. With this recent sell-off, its 1-year return is a little less than 10%, but it has a 10-year return of right around 360%, outperforming SCHG by nearly 50 percentage points. So now the question is, do we swap IWY for SCHG? Maybe.
Not really. Maybe. It's classified.
When it comes to the portfolio for IWY, it's a lot more concentrated with around 110 different holdings, but it's very focused on large cap, high quality companies that continue to have lots of room to grow. So when the market goes through a bull run, this is one of the best ETFs to be holding. Now this is a very small fund compared to others with a $12 billion AUM and a slightly below average expense ratio of 0.2%, so still very low compared to others. Now because an ETF like this one can experience significant growth during bull markets, this typically means that it is a higher risk ETF. So depending on your investment style and risk tolerance, you might want to combine it with a different value or dividend ETF. Now this brings me to the next one, which is also a very high risk yet high reward ETF. It's called FTEC, or the Fidelity Information Technology ETF. Now this fund has been absolutely crushing it over the past decade with a nearly 500% 10-year return, which, not including any leveraged ETFs, has outperformed really any other fund. And that is mostly due to a very aggressive technology bull run that we've been experiencing over the past decade or so. But I personally think that going forward into the next 10 and even 20 years, the technology sector will continue to outperform the broad market, which is why I think this ETF is still considered extremely underrated. And its holdings obviously consist of those large cap technology companies with some fast growing and popular names such as Palantir at number 10 with 1.6 million shares held. And part of the reason why I think this ETF is still underrated is because it's fairly small compared to others. Its AUM is just under 12 billion, which to me is still pretty small, but I'm certain that as that number increases, it will gain a lot more in popularity. It's another one that's also very cheap to own. Its expense ratio is 0.08%, so you're only paying $8 every year for every $10,000 you have invested. So I think FTEC is one of the best high growth tech sector ETFs that will continue to rapidly grow throughout the long term, allowing investors like you and I to become incredibly wealthy. And like I said before, if this is an ETF that might be a little too risky for your investing style, it could be a great fund to mix and match with lower volatility ETFs like FDVV, for example. So let me know what you guys think of these 3 underrated ETFs, and I will see you all next time.